Welcome to another episode of Conversations with Dr.Da Silva. This is a show where we bring various guests to talk about various different topics. The vision of the show is to give us little people a voice, and the mission is to have engaging conversations to share something that we're passionate about. And today I have a guest, Klaus. Klaus, welcome.
Thank you.
And please, what are we talking about today?
Whoa, I'd love to talk about myself, so that's not a problem. Well, I think you asked me here because you were interested in hearing about kind of some of my story in regard to what I'm passionate about. What?
Who are you?
Who am I?
Yes.
Well, right now I'm the president of my congregation. That's part of what I am.
And what congregation is that?
That's the Unitarian Universalist Church at Shelter Rock, which I'm actually quite proud to be a member of. It's quite a place, and I think you know it. That's how I know you.
So. Yeah, I know
you've been there. I've
Yes.
seen you around. And I think you and I have had a conversation how we're both very proud to be part of that church. We do a lot of great things in the world. I can certainly talk a lot about that. I mean, it's part of who I am. I wasn't raised as a Unitarian, but I came to Unitarianism. I think largely because of my children. We discovered the Unitarian Church at that time. It was a Plan Dome in Manhasset, Plan Dome Road, and. We were looking for some kind of, religious affiliation for our daughters. I had never been a particularly, I've never really been involved in a church. I mean, I was raised in a Lutheran tradition. My parents really never became involved in that. They made me go to get confirmed, and I did that until I was, 12, and then I kind of, went for another year after that. But because my parents weren't involved, I didn't stay involved either. And I remember when I was going to do my confirmation training, which took 2 years, I actually liked it. It was nice. But because of my parents not being involved, I could never fully feel a part of it. So when it came time for our children to have some kind of religious education or religious affiliation, we discovered the Unitarian Church. And that was because my wife worked with someone who was a member of the church at that time, and she said, "You want to maybe check this out? They have a great religious education program." And we did, and I think it's been, I'm going to say it's 24 years later. We're still there, and now I'm the president of the congregation. And I have to tell you that I only agreed to become the president of the congregation because of the religious education program. I believe that my daughters, who are, I'm proud of, very proud of, they're wonderful, productive adults now, and I think that the religious education program helped to make them who they are. But it was also my involvement in the church and in the church community that helped me to be a better parent. It was that whole concept of it takes a village to raise a child. And, we believed in that, my wife and I, and it certainly has paid off for us, and it continues to be important for us to be involved in the organization. Your previous guest, for example, talked about NAMI, which is an organization that works with mental illness and tries to bring awareness to mental illness and remove some of the stigma around that. Well, we support that organization. We've given them money and we give them space to have meetings at our church. And I just went actually this past Monday, I went to an awards dinner. They gave the congregation an award thanking us for our support of that organization. And I have to tell you, it made me proud. It really made me proud, So anyway, I'm going on and on about how proud I am about the congregation, but I can't help it. We do such great things, and it's a really vibrant, alive and involved place, So here I am, So one of my biggest passions right now is my involvement there.
Well, it's interesting because it's also, I've been there for 23 years. Yeah.
Have you been there that long?
Yeah, 23 years.
Wow.
I came in 1994.
Oh, okay.
And Duncan Whiteside and Sandy Whiteside has something to do with it.
Oh yeah, I remember you telling me.
I used to work with North Shore Child Family Guidance, the Turnabout program, a family-based treatment program. And one day I walked by her office and she had a mug on a table and said Unitarian Universalist. And I said, "What is that?" And here I am. The rest is history. So it's all about the mugs and the marketing, I guess.
The mugs, yeah.
That's what
we've got
gets you
great
going.
mugs,
But one thing that brought me, that I thought was amazing about our congregation, where the media kind of basically pits one religion against another religion, and all the things that basically happens. And here we are. Our congregation tends to be predominantly, Catholics and Jews, but you have atheists, you have agnostics, you have, various denominations of Christianity, you have Muslims, you have Hindus, you have Buddhists. And I was like,
pagans too.
Yeah, and the thing that's amazing that meanwhile the world has this kind of sense about religion and everything else, but meanwhile so many of us come from various different cultures and beliefs and so on, and we're able to do such wonderful things, like just talking about NAMI now, and we're able to put our collective, and I felt that what's great about it that I got to learn. If I continue going the path of being Catholic as I was brought up, I would not have the opportunity to learn about others, my other brothers and sisters from the other part of the world, and that's been one of the greatest journey for me, being part of that, and that's why bringing you on here to the show is kind of like, because most people don't know who UUs are, Unitarian Universalists are, and it's an opportunity because we do so many wonderful things.
Yeah.
And it's an opportunity for people to know there's another option where if they're not happy wherever they are at this particular time, there's a place for them. We're about principles. We're not about creeds. We're about, basically encouraging us to take our own personal journey. And I think that's beautiful. But what I also wanted to talk about is your relationship with being a vegetarian and a yogi.
Well, I'll tell you about it. I've been a lifelong vegetarian since right after graduating college. I was living with my wife at the time, and we had another roommate, and she came back actually from a year of travel in India and Nepal, and actually she came back with hepatitis, and the three of us were living together, and as a result of having had a severe case of hepatitis, she couldn't eat any fats. And basically she was on a vegetarian diet. So the three of us decided, you know what, this really is not a bad thing. Let's try this at this time. And it was actually at the time that the news came out about hormones coming through the meat supply. And we were just, we were poor college students basically, and we couldn't afford a good cut of meat anyway. So it was easy to give up eating meat, and we did. And that was about 43 years ago now. So we've been lifelong vegetarians. And did I tell you the story about my perfect blood work?
Yeah, I think, but I have a feeling that you're going to tell us again. But go ahead.
I'm going to tell you again. So lifelong vegetarian, and I just went and had my annual physical, and my doctor, she looked at my blood chart, and she said, wow, she goes, you have a perfect blood work here. And she shows the nurse, and she says, look at this guy's got perfect blood work. So I've been telling that story ever since. So, but the point is that It's been a lifelong commitment to stay on this diet. When we first became vegetarians, it was really not that prevalent. Now these days you can go out and you can get a vegan meal even. Now we're not vegans, mainly because when we first stopped eating meat, it was really difficult to go anywhere to eat but your own house. I mean, I remember going out to a friend's house, and I would get like a plate of corn, and that was considered a meal. So actually, in my later years, I have become a little bit more militant in my vegetarianism. I have to say, I keep telling my friends that they're unethical in eating meat, and but I only say that jokingly. I mean, there's
because plants have feelings too.
Yes,
that.
they do. They certainly do.
Just want to make sure
I agree. I knew somebody once that the only food they would eat would be food that actually dropped off the tree. They wouldn't even pick any kind of vegetable, but that's another story. But yeah, so that's been a lifelong commitment, and I have to say it's been well, let me just say at this stage in my life, I feel healthy, and I don't necessarily think it's for everybody because it takes a bit of work to change over your diet. It's a hard thing to do. Some people attempt to do that over a short period of time, but it took us a long time to really switch our diets over. So I don't recommend, going cold turkey and all of a sudden not eating meat. I think what you should try to do is whenever you try to change your diet is to really wean yourself from whatever it is that you're trying to get rid of, and that's where I think people make a lot of mistake and often fail as a result of that.
Right.
They kind of jump into it. So, our vegetarianism, that's been a lifelong commitment. Our daughters are not vegetarians; they eat meat. And I lord it over them all the time how they're unethical and I am. And they just say, "Oh, Dad, you're just being ridiculous again." I say, "Well, yes, I am, but it's still true." So, and it's actually kind of gratifying to see the recognition that the vegetarian diet is recognized as really a much more beneficial diet in terms of health issues. Listen, when my wife was pregnant with our first child, I mean, the pediatrician or the obstetrician he didn't want to treat her because he said that as a vegetarian, it was not a healthy thing for a pregnant woman, and that she should start eating meat. So she said, "Well, I'm not going to eat meat," and then we wound up changing to a different obstetrician to that would treat her. So that's kind of how the medical view was at that time, that it was an unhealthy way to live. I mean, my retort always was when I went to the doctor, well, all those people that live in India, they can't be wrong, so, and they're alive. So it's gratifying to see that there's recognition of that. And then the whole, it's now starting to get into the whole issue of not only is it a good diet, but it's also the way that we treat the animals that we raise,
lifestyle.
And yes. All of that kind of stuff. But I don't want to get into that. It gets,
So kind of a perfect segue. You were talking about India, and they all can be wrong. Talk about your relationship with yoga.
Well, that's it's been I can't say it's been a lifelong practice, but we started doing yoga. We're your typical hippies. What can I tell you? Jello. We practiced yoga back, started, I think, probably, when was it, 74 or something like that. Yoga was just starting to hit, come to America. We started going to a yoga ashram, and we started, practice yoga. Although I have to say that I was never, a real practitioner of yoga in my earlier years. I always felt a spiritual connection to the yogic practice, because yoga is really a spiritual practice, and the asanas, the poses are really just one part of that spiritual practice. It's called an 8-limbed practice. There's 8 parts of it that is really the part of the whole philosophy of yoga. So. Part of it is everything in moderation. don't overdo anything. If you want to drink wine, if you want to drink whiskey, it's all fine. Just in moderation. I mean,
Right.
that's one of the teachings of it. It's one of the limbs of the yogic practice. And so I always felt a very big affinity for that. And it really wasn't until I hit 50 that my yoga practice became a real commitment, an everyday commitment for me. I'm 67 now, and I go to yoga, 5 days a week, and it's a real important part of my life, and that's why I have perfect blood work.
That's wonderful.
So it's an important thing to not only do the practice, but what's another very interesting part for me is this idea of sangha.
Sangha.
Sangha means the community, the group.
Okay.
Okay, and it's kind of an interesting theme for me, because I also talked about it in terms of Unitarian Church. I mean, what speaks to me at the Unitarian Church is this idea of community. That we're all of like-minded, trying to kind of do good in the world, or try to do the best that we can in the world. And the idea is also present in the yogic philosophy, this idea of sangha. And when I go to my yoga practice, I've been going to the same studio for 15 years now, and there's a real core group of people. They all show up, And what's interesting about it is, I really don't know who they are as people. I know their names now after 15 years. Finally, I'm a slow learner, but. What's interesting about it is you start to have this real respect for the people that show up there, because let me put it this way. I know how hard it is for me to show up when I go. And there's days I don't want to go, or if I'm doing a pose and it's a really difficult pose, or it's been a really difficult practice, the teacher's really, being very mean today, or something, I know the suffering that I'm going through, or the concentration that I'm having to put into this practice. And to see all the other people in the room doing the same thing, you can't help but have an admiration for what it is that they're doing, because you have an empathy, you have an understanding about what's going on some understanding about what's going on for them, because you're also, experiencing that. So you really do feel a great connection to the sangha, to everybody, that community that shows up there. And and as the years go by, you start to learn about everybody's injuries. Somebody, has a really strong practice. She broke 5 of her vertebrae in her neck, and she was out for 6 months. They told her no more yoga. You got to take it easy.
Right.
6 months later, she's back, and her practice is now back. This was a year ago. It's now back to where it was when before she had her injuries. And you hear people going and having knee surgeries and all those things,
Right.
and they all come back, because it's a really powerful force in their lives that helps them to not only stay healthy, but helps them to stay mentally balanced.
Right.
It's a really, we call each other the yoga junkies, because we kind of get a little nervous when we haven't gone to our yoga class in a while, and everybody will talk about how they really need the practice, not only just for the, the physical aspect of
Right.
it, but the spiritual aspect and the connection that we have with each other when you show up, all the time, and you see how hard everybody works. You get it's a nice thing to experience. It really is.
Well, it seems like you definitely have a balance in your life journey. It's interesting how you mentioned Sangha and what it means, community, and I think that I get that from Shelter Rock,
Yeah.
the congregation, because it has been a wonderful community for me for all these years. It's a safe haven. It's a place that fulfills a lot of my needs.
Mm-hmm.
But like you were saying, the way you're describing how these people show up for yoga class, and and sometimes it's really kind of a struggle and so on, and all of us are struggling. We all come from various different paths and so on. But when we're there, I mean, the sense of connection, and and having this mission on whatever part that we're working on. It's just like it's a sense of connection that I've not found anywhere else, and it's a wonderful feeling. It's something that you just you can't get enough of.
Yeah, yeah. And the sense of pride.
Yeah.
And that's what when I talk about the Sangha, the yoga practice, where you understand what everybody's going through. I mean, I think that the Unitarian Church, I mean, UUCSR, we're different than most churches. The sense of pride that I have in our congregation, in the sense that we give away $13 million a year.
Wow.
To
how much do we give away?
13 million.
I got to talk to the treasurer again.
Well, we support a lot of good causes.
Yeah,
we have a foundation, and we
What's the name of that foundation?
The Veach Foundation. And we, through that foundation, we give out, grants to grassroots organizations that are trying to do, good things in the world. For example, we're trying to work on racial justice. We're trying to work on, we support groups that are trying to have a fair wage for farm workers. You name it. We have different initiatives within that, within that foundation where we're trying to support all of these things. So this sense of pride, that I have when you show up there, like when I talked about NAMI, being there, and the sense of pride that we support this organization doing some wonderful work in our community. And it's the same thing, so, while sometimes being the president of the congregation is difficult, I think any congregation, it takes work to make it function and to move it forward and to have it continue in its good works. And it's stressful at times, I have to say, but because of the pride that I have in the church and because of what it has done for me personally and for my daughters in terms of who they are, who they've become as adults, that's what keeps me involved in that. And it's the same theme again as my involvement in the yoga practice, and it is a practice being a member of the Unitarian Church. You have to practice all the time.
Yeah, that's how you get Carnegie Hall, right?
Yeah.
And so basically, there is a possibility for attaining perfection, right? You got perfect blood.
Well, I only have perfection in one area, but I'm working on the other ones. And you can't tell my wife I told you this story on
We're too late now.
Well, she'll never look at this.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure.
Because she says she's not going out with me anymore if I tell that story.
Well, Klaus, I just want to say thank you for joining us and joining our show.
Well, my pleasure.
And hopefully we'll get the message out there to people about who we are and so on. And I want to say thank you for another episode of Conversation with Dr.Da Silva. Hello and welcome to another show with Conversation with Dr.